The Swell Season Podcast is recorded by the NewsStand studio at Rockefeller Center in the heart of Manhattan and is distributed by the Swell Season Surf Radio Network.
The shores of San Diego County, home to Kumeyaay ancestral sites, idyllic beaches, multi-million-dollar real estate, and military zones and bases. This coastline is also the spot in which the United States Armed Forces and its scientists collide with mid-century surfing, entangling its technological innovations with Indigenous practice.
Hello, and welcome to the Swell Season Surf Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Breuer. The Inevitable Return is a short documentary film that explores the history of how military technology and atomic testing became entangled in contemporary surfing amongst the militarized beaches of the San Diego area. Using verite footage and animation, the film follows Shuuluk, a Kumeyaay surfer who interacts daily with the resulting effects and complexities of occupation on his land and in his sport, and reclaims it as a practice of joy, play, and connection. This is one of the many incredible films that will be screening at Shredding, a new lens in surf filmmaking, a powerful short film program that challenges outdated stereotypes about who belongs in surf culture. From Morocco to Palestine to the California coast, these films spotlight surfers whose presence on the water redefines what it means to shred. It is presented by OTC at the Brooks and will screen on Friday, July 25th at 8 p.m. at the historic Sunshine Brooks Theater in Oceanside, California. So go check it out, listeners, if you are in the area. Through stories of access, identity, and resilience, Shredding celebrates a new wave of surfers, expanding the sport's image, and invites audiences to reimagine surf culture as a space of joy, freedom, and connection. Here joining us is the program director and filmmaker behind The Inevitable Return, Zachary Zezima, and the subject of the film, Shuuluk Leo-Retz, to discuss the film and the film festival. Zach, Shuuluk, welcome to Swell Season. Super stoked to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you. I just gotta say, for fuck's sake, what a great movie. Holy shit. I just have to start. Like, your film is amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really appreciate the story of how many of the surfing staples today that we take for granted are built on like this foundation of death, destruction, and the military complex, and layered with your story, Shuuluk, like of the other Indigenous people's stories on top of these advancements. Like it's beautifully layered and really well done. And it's this great intertwining narrative. And I first just want to commend both of you on what a great film. And I was hoping you can kind of explain a little bit to our listeners what your intent behind this film was.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can start. I think a lot of the film is really Shuuluk, so I'll let him speak to that. But I could start off by saying where this idea came from. And yeah, so I learned to surf when I moved to California like 12 years ago. I grew up on Long Island, as you did. Uh,
Yes.
and was not I didn't like have the means to surf there at the time as a
Yeah.
kid. So when I moved to California, I started learning. And I saw that surf culture, at least in LA, was really
Mhm.
different from the way that like the media portrays surfing and
Yeah.
the way that surfers themselves portray surfing. There's this idea that it's sort of like a pseudo religion. It's like this really connective thing, which I don't disagree with. But in the water, I definitely witnessed stuff that would not fit into that framework. And, I witnessed violence, I witnessed hate speech, and I witnessed things that felt like they were not not only not appropriate anywhere, but like definitely not in surfing. Um, so it just kind of got me thinking, like, why does this happen, and why does this happen here? And there's a burgeoning uh, new part of history called critical design. Sorry, not critical design. That's my other job. I teach art at Cal State LA. Critical surf history. So
Mm.
there's a lot of history in surfing. There's a lot of reasons why surfing is not always the most inclusive thing. And I had a larger idea for like a huge film or like maybe a series, and I decided to start with this one where it was really the military's influence in surfing. And in the film, it describes how wetsuits and wave forecasting and wave measurement and surfboard materials and designs and shapes all came from the military and specifically from the Southern California coast. And a lot of it has to do with land use. And when I started like learning a little bit about that with the military in San Diego, it felt imperative for me to include some Indigenous voices. And I had already been talking to Mark Chavez from Native Like Water about this film. And Native
Yeah.
Like Water, if you're not familiar, is a great program, and Shuuluk can speak to it much better than me. Um, and I asked him, like, do you work with any surfers who you think would be interested in like filming with me? And he was like, yeah, Shuuluk would be great. And we talked on the phone, and I feel like Shuuluk really like got the idea and had a lot to add and had really powerful story on his own. So that's kind of where my work ended, and I think Shuuluk kind of took over. So I don't know. What do you want to say, Shuuluk?
Yeah. Well, you know, I remember getting the text message from Zach, and Mark and I, we built a really good relationship over the years. I grew up, born and raised on the Viejas Indian Reservation, moved to Hawaii when I was around a year old, then
Wow.
moved back when I was 8 years old to the reservation. And Mark found out about me, got in touch. And so I had already had a surfing background. We went out there. My mom finished her degree at HPU. 4 years turned into 8. It was the best upbringing ever.
Seriously.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate in that regard. And, came out here, had surfing involved, but I was distant from the beach, kind of, reintroduced to surfing when I was around 14 years old, fully. Like I was back where I was in Hawaii, like surfing every day, doing this. So long story short, when I got it, I was like, oh, this is so cool because I've never really understood this history of surfing in California.
Mhm.
And I definitely didn't understand the history of the militarization in California. So having kind of those two things connect to me, I was like, whoa, this is so interesting. I'm like so intrigued and want to learn more. And, Zachary was showing me just like different charts and different things and Bikini Atoll and just like opening my mind up to like kind of the military influence. So, I was like, what do I have to add, And that's what a huge thought was, I was kind of hesitant at first because I really didn't know what I could add to that.
Mhm.
And Zach, we sat down and he just told me like, I think it's gonna, come out the way that it's meant to be. And I think we both really just trusted that process. And I didn't have an idea of what the end result would be.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how my story would fit in with that. And seeing the end result now, it's very, it makes a lot of sense. And I didn't realize that within it. So,
Well, it's fascinating because like you have a connection with this person who created this technology that we all use today for surfing, and you had a connection through your mother with Walter Monk, which is mentioned in the story, and I thought that was an interesting little kind of like shatter point in history, almost like being able to talk to this person because for our listeners, if they're not familiar, he is basically like the father of wave forecasting, but he did it not because for anything, peaceful. It was so that they could land, in all the islands in the Pacific, during World War II, and that they could strike and kill people more efficiently, basically, which is fascinating. And he, but then he, this is a tool that we all use for pleasure, but it was used for pain. And but he did say something to you that I thought was fascinating. And he said this quote, like your mom asked him, well, maybe you should tell this story. Can you tell this story? Is this all right? I don't
yeah,
want to
no.
spoil it for everyone, Zach, but it's like, I think it's a really poignant quote that he says, and it sets the tone for the rest of the film, basically.
Wow.
It's just, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
can you tell a little bit about this story and what was happening, why you got to meet him, and what was said? Listeners
Yes.
are on their pins and needles now.
So back in 2018, my mother was contacted to come over and discuss a potential mural project that painted and kind of celebrated the Kumeyaay history. And that's how we ended up at Walter Monk's house. And so as I was there, it was a great time. My mom really wanted to bring me. This, I didn't even know at the time either. I was probably a senior in high school, but
Yeah.
I never really looked into that. And then so, started connecting the dots and seeing, wow, this is really cool. And so we go over there, and pretty much it was, he shared a sentiment. My mom had asked, what advice would you have for Shuuluk, a native boy who is a young man, coming into himself, something like that. And he was pretty much just like, it's not your land. And the way that I don't even know.
Such a random thing to say.
It was so random, and that was the thing, is that like when I told Zachary this, everyone is taken back when I tell them, and that's I was again, and another piece that I guess proved instrumental in the film, but at the time, was really kind of like a talking point of like, are we giving, thought to something that really isn't even there? Was it like within his later years and going senile? Like it didn't make sense, and so it's interesting that it now serves as kind of a really important piece in the film from the outside perspective. But yeah, it was an awkward quote, and definitely wasn't expecting it.
I can't help but feel like, though, like Zach, particularly, like that quote serves a real purpose in this story.
Yeah.
It's this mentality of the men of that time in that era where might made right, and it was, the discardment of indigenous culture, right? But at the same time, like, all those people in the military, many of them spent time in Hawaii, and that's how surfing grew, is because many of them spent time in Hawaii, learned to surf, and brought it back with them, and there obviously it was brought back before, but it really took off. And so it's interesting that you have this mentality of like someone who one could feel like attached to nature. They've figured out the mathematics of, wave forecasting, and something that, can be used for something peaceful, and something that can be helpful, and something natural. And you would think he would be more tuned in with things because of that. But instead, he has this attitude of, well, your indigenous culture, this is not your land anymore. This is our land almost. And this is our sport almost. I feel like that's what happened with surfing is it got taken over from indigenous people in Hawaii and it became our sport, instead. And it's not yours anymore type of attitude. And I think that's I just thought that was what really fascinating and set the tone. I could be way off, Zach. I don't know.
No.
I could be reading into it, but
No, that's
was
right.
that your intent?
Yeah, and I think there's a few things I want to speak to on this point.
Yes.
One is the way that this story came about. I didn't know that Shuuluk and his mother had this connection when me and Shuuluk started filming. She kind of like brought it up when I first met her when we weren't filming, and I was like, oh my god, I had no idea. And that's kind of the magic of documentary filmmaking. Like things come up and things happen that you weren't expecting.
Force
and
is strong with you.
Yeah, if I set out to find someone who had a connection with Walter Monk, I would never find them. But
it's like, why would you? It's
right,
so true.
But it happened, and I think I don't want to speak too much for you, Shuuluk, but I know there was like maybe a little bit of hesitation to like speak to this story on camera, because Walter Monk is like a revered figure in San Diego, especially. But I do think that there are complicated stories that we all have and things that we all say, and that show sort of like these layers of our consciousness and our attitude, whether he knew what he was saying or not, or whether it was interpreted the way that he meant it or not. I think it does reveal a certain attitude, not only about surfing, but about like imperialism and colonialism, and this idea that the military is a dominating force, which has influenced surfing in these ways by integrating tools of war into this like indigenous practice. The other thing I was going to mention, actually I'm forgetting right now, but we can come back to it if you need, or you can edit that out. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I'll probably remember the other point later.
Well, to me, I find it like, I just feel like there's one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys, how do you feel about separating the discovery or the artwork from the artist or the engineer or the mathematician, because it's hard, right? Like it's very difficult. There are these complicated characters in history, especially in surfing. We have a lot of complex people who have done amazing things for the sport, but have also not been always the best people. And it's like always like a weird tension of like trying to square those things. And I think there's redemption in it too, maybe in the sense that we are using this tool now for peaceful purposes as well. And we're using it to a degree that brings maybe people together more, or allows people to experience a certain sense of joy or excitement or even entertainment maybe. And maybe there's redemption in that. I don't know. Or maybe it's all just built on, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but maybe a lot of our surf culture is just built on so much death and destruction. Is it redeemable in some ways?
Oh, I like that you mentioned that we have redeemed it in some ways, because I think we truly have, and I think at the start, and there's like some cyclical pattern to this, and tracing the history of surfing back to its foundations, I think ebbs and flows, it's a wave in itself, and I think tracing it back to times of war, that wave rides with the wave of humanity, and looking at the water is a reflection of yourself. It's a reflection of this world around us. So I think it's a perfect emblematic example of kind of what you're saying, like that redemption, the redemption of yourself, that redemption of this way you make relations around you.
The technology even can be redeeming, it's right. Like, I'm very aware that I feel like every candle casts a shadow, right? Like there's a good and negative to all these things. And yeah, it's interesting. Like, surfboard foam, the blanks that we use came from aerospace technology. Bob Simmons, worked for aerospace, and like those are airplane wings that are used in, you know, fighter jets and things of that nature. So it's interesting that, yes, so much that we benefit from, unfortunately, has come from so much death. And maybe, but that's, I think, what you're doing then with this festival, Zach, is that part of the redemption by acknowledging the past, acknowledging some of the destruction that we've had, and the destruction in the wake of all these things, but also looking towards a brighter future, trying to open it up to everyone,
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's kind of what I was thinking about with this redeeming quality. I mean, someone might watch this film or even other films in the program and come away with like maybe a negative feeling, or a feeling that surfing is bad, or something like that. And that's really not the intention. I think, like you said, acknowledging the history is really the first step into redeeming it. And I think if we kind of blindly participate in things, not just surfing, but in other parts of our everyday lives, and not like interrogate the history or even be curious about it, I think that leaves us kind of vulnerable. And by acknowledging and learning, I think that is a way to take something that maybe was negative or deadly or a part of war and make it something beautiful again, like it always has been. And I think, like Shuuluk, you talk about that a little bit in the film, that it's kind of like your ceremony, right? And I think people use surfing for all different kinds of things. But if you're someone who uses it for power and domination over one another and over the ocean, and you have no idea about the thing that's under your feet coming from the military industrial complex, I think you're only repeating mistakes and like not learning from history. So that's kind of like the underlying theme
Yeah.
of the film. I don't know. I don't think it's explicit. I think the film itself asks you to ask a lot of questions and doesn't necessarily have those answers. But that was kind of like my mindset behind it.
Look, I'm curious, like where you live now, are there other kids and other people your age that surf? Or are you the only one in your area, on your land that surfs?
Uh, for a while, I think I was, but now my younger cousin, he just graduated high school. He surfs.
Nice.
He's just bought his new like this new Paizel board and was so stoked about it, calling me up and everything. So that's the greatest fun ever,
I
because I
Yeah,
know
go on. Sorry.
just know the appreciation that I have, and the revitalization of my connection to like not only the ocean and a
Hmm.
sport and a passion that I love, but my deepening of an understanding of myself and my people's history. So it's beautiful. I know that'll come for everyone who is able to be blessed by the ocean, especially San Diego and connect people
I'm
in that area.
I'm super curious, like what it was like growing up surfing, and one of the main reasons I asked is because I feel a kinship in some ways to you, because I grew up away from the ocean. I was like an hour away, and it was tough to go and tough to get a ride down to the beach. And I didn't have a lot of other people who grew up surfing around me. Zach, you can attest there weren't a lot of people in Long Island surfing, in the 90s and 80s. But there's something interesting, I think, that happens to you when you grow up kind of surfing alone, like, or not having like people in your immediate area. And I'm curious, like, how surfing played into your upbringing, but also your connection with your culture and your family and your history, and how those two intertwined and made for a more unique upbringing within surfing.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's an endless discovery. And that's the
We
beauty of
got all
surfing.
night.
Right. You know, just kind of preface it like that. So like you could ask me this question probably tomorrow and I'd give you a slightly different answer,
Yeah.
right? You know, so it's a beautiful question. And, you know, I think I can't even explain how fortunate I feel to have spent time in Hawaii and nourished by the land and the people of that area, because they really ignited that flame that I would soon discover was always burning, you know? And as a surfer and growing up at a young age, you know, I really couldn't access the ocean.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was like 14 years old that I started being able to get down to the beach, like on a consistent basis, taking the bus route and stuff. And my parents were okay with that. So that was cool because they knew I loved it. And I was always doing it and always surfing, like you said, usually by myself. It was usually like my dad, he surfs, he boogie boards and surfs stand-up paddle boards. And
that doesn't count. No, I'm just kidding.
right? You know, that's what I tell him as well. I go, yeah, you know, 55 years old. He's wearing out. He's throwing the white flag.
Oh
So
no!
anything that
Don't give up, man. Don't give up.
Right, I know. It's a hard thing though, because like it's so true. Once you stop surfing for a while, it's really hard to pick it back up like you did before, and it takes a while, you know. And so I'm, you know, still I always feel like I'm still in that area of surfing, you know, and I think that's in part due to the distance I am from the beach. You know, it's a bummer not being able to like look out or drive 5 minutes away, check the surf, and then decide which spot you want to go. You know, I kind of just like blind it, you know, go and get there by a certain time. So it did feel like that a lot growing up. And as I started understanding and, you know, I was getting more involved in my culture and learning my people's history, singing bird song, sweating, and really just kind of taking a moment to appreciate that aspect of life, I really realized that what I cherish so much, surfing, the passion that I had, my connection that I felt, was always in existence and always living through me. And I really appreciated that understanding that I was able to deepen. And if you look at San Diego, the San Diego River, it's the most beautiful thing ever. It flowed from Cuyamaca Mountains all the way about 10 miles north of where my house is, all the way out to the ocean. And it was a bloodline of San Diego, you know, and that's where I was displaced from.
Wow.
Is from that area, that bloodline, from that water. And I think there's something really powerful to that for me, to be able to recognize that, like we said, or acknowledge that. So in the same way that I think this can be a great, you know, this movie has been and will be a great understanding and questioning moment for the audience, it was the equal thing for me. You know, it really made me cherish that and take a step back and acknowledge it again, because just in that little way of understanding our connection to the water and understanding our connection as people who have now been displaced from the water, you really do revitalize that. And in Kumeyaay, we say hauka, and that translates directly to I acknowledge or I see the fire that burns within inside you. And it's so true that we have to continue to acknowledge those things to keep that fire burning inside of us. And surfing has been that, and it always will be that, because it's, like I said, endless, you know, and the creation is continuous.
How do you feel when you go down to surf in San Diego and someone tries to pull like a localism type of attitude or something like that? Does that get frustrating at all? Like, do you ever just want to be like, fuck you guys, get off my fucking land.
Yeah. And I find myself doing that more often than I would like. I still find myself falling into aggressive manners, when I'm out there. If someone's doing like what you described.
Of course.
I don't think it's like taking bullshit like that, and people are miseducated and people are ill-informed. And, if I can just continue to, have that backbone, I'll speak on it whenever I have the opportunity.
Can I ask, like, what did your mom do? Like, what was she studying in Hawaii, and what was it? Was she a painter so she did murals? I was curious, like, what she did in order to be asked to meet Walter Monk and also like discuss this like whole mural process. So I was curious, like, how she fits into all this.
Yeah. So no, she's an artist in many ways, but not a painter. She went to HBU and she was studying sociology and Native Hawaiian studies.
Wow.
So my mom's a very intelligent woman. She's always been a lover of all knowledges. And so she's been able to work inside academia as advising in the advising capacity, in the consulting capacity, and in the creation of like grants projects. And so my mom is definitely someone who people within San Diego and within the academics of Native American kind of faceted area, her name is definitely highly frequented or sought after for approval for these different types of things.
So did you grow up learning a lot about indigenous Hawaiian culture as well, Ben, I would imagine, or been exposed to some of that and the surfing connection there?
Yeah. I was very fortunate. We had a family out there, the Kahiapos, like Kavika Kahiapo, who's a professional. His wife, Auntie Lori, they adopted us into their family when we first moved out there. And so, I had my Hanai family out there, and I was able to, get real good appreciation and understanding and love. You feel the love, and I think that's where it all clicks. And I felt the love out in Hawaii from the family and the exposure that I got to. I'm always endeavoring to learn more about Hawaiian culture and the history of Hawaii, but I would be a fool to say that I was immersed within it to a point to where I understood it, because it's hard to understand.
Yeah,
what happened.
Well, I think there's a kinship, I imagine, there's a kinship, I imagine, amongst, and this is, I'm a cis white guy, so maybe so pardon me, but I imagine there is this. It seems like there's this connection of indigenous cultures, especially over in recent years. I feel like it's more connecting. I feel like indigenous cultures around the world are starting to connect more and starting to speak out more and trying to preserve culture, but also assert that, hey, we were here before. This was us, and you took away something really special, and I think it's I don't know if you feel like that, if there's this awakening happening and also this understanding of people like me maybe who are starting to become more aware of indigenous culture and indigenous histories and how we've not served it correctly in history and been butchers to it. Yeah, I don't know. I was just curious, like, how you feel about that. If you feel like there's connection there when you surf and when you meet other Hawaiians or people of other indigenous cultures around the world that may surf as well.
100%, unequivocally. There is connection, unspoken connection, spoken connection, historical connection, archaeological connections. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And, I recently was out last 2 Aprils ago out in Hawaii for the Buffalo Classic, if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
And I had one auntie tell me a story about how during the AIM movement, they had Lakotas and Mohawks come in to Hawaii who were
Wow.
escaping the FBI back in the day and the CIA who were out there to get them, and they housed them a bunch. So there is a
Wow.
presence down in Makaha of descendants of Lakota
No
and
way.
Mohawk. That's what I'm told.
Wow.
And so it's these type of things, they're existing all around us, and it's beautiful, our connection's always it's always been there, and I think it's epigenetic, it's like it's within our DNA to recognize it, and it's beautiful. Yeah, for sure.
Zach, I love the film because you covered a wide range of inventions that have had
Mhm.
these effects, and I thought it was interesting, like the people you brought up, like Hugh Bratner, who invented neoprene, for, so that they could be more nimble and loose, so they can attack people. And then the one name that really stood out to me, I was really interested in, I knew a bit about, but John Kelly, who,
Mhm. Mhm.
trained frogmen, how to fight, and how to survive in the water.
Mhm.
Yet this guy, the back half of his life was dedicated towards Hawaiian culture, preserving Hawaiian culture, preserving the environment, fighting the military industrial complex. So
Mhm.
it like I said, there are these redemption stories. Were there any other stories you came across that you didn't include that you
Mhm.
think should be mentioned or talked about that you'd like
Mhm.
to explore even in the future?
Yeah. I think the one that comes up for me is about Willard Bascom, who was an oceanographer and scientist who had no intentions of working with the military, but like in the 40s and 50s, that's like where he ended up. And he was a part of the first scientists to go to Bikini Atoll and Eniwetok Atoll, which I mentioned in the film. But I just wrote an article actually for Emotion magazine
Nice.
that kind of um, explains this a little bit more and integrates interviews from native Bikinians and quotes from Willard's book, where he kind of kept a journal of
Mm-hmm.
his military exploits and with the ocean, and so he has like a first person written record of when he arrived at Bikini and like what he saw of the people and the place and like how people lived. And then there are first person accounts of the Bikinians being like contacted by the US military and being asked to leave, and being told that this would be for the betterment of all humanity and it would end all wars to allow their home to be like a bombing ground. And like that's mentioned a little bit in the film, but in the article in Emotion, it like has the actual quotes and actual like first person accounts. And it's striking. I mean, I think you might think that Willard, like this military scientist, would be unsympathetic, and he really isn't. He's like he feels sad for this situation. He doesn't quite understand like why it's happening, and neither do the people. But everyone's just like kind of doing it because that's what the government said should happen. And then it happens, and Bikini Atoll is used for many, many nuclear bomb tests. And part of what they were testing was to see how bombs would interact with the water, but also interact with ships. And what came out of it was wave measurement buoys and technology that we use today. Like on our Surfline app, it's the same. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But really, what also came out of it was like nuclear bombs are devastating, like within that very small amount of space. And outside of that, like the waves don't travel that far. The fallout obviously does, but like the actual physical immediate results are really small and contained. And it's like, why did we need to drop 50 bombs on this island to figure that out? And then the Bikinians could never return, even though they were promised a return. And they are now spread around the world. Many of them are in the deep south of the continental US or at other islands in the South Pacific. And there's like 6 or 7 original Bikinians still alive. Everyone else who is of Bikinian descent has never been there.
Wow.
And it's just like an enormous tragedy, and almost nothing came out of it. It was like completely unnecessary. So yeah, it's just kind of a shocking story that most people don't know.
It's crazy because it's you have this theme in the film as well, where it's like the military takes up all this land, all this indigenous land, and for what? Like Camp Pendleton, took up all this indigenous land and put it off limits to surfers too, up until like 70s and 80s even, and it's fascinating, right? Like the buoys we use are drenched in the exploitation of the Bikini Atollans, the people from the Bikini Islands. It really makes you pause and think. It's like, fuck.
Yeah.
Why do we need wars and military to advance technology to do this stuff?
It's a strange dichotomy. Yeah. And I think it brings up a point that I'm remembering now from earlier.
Yes.
Dina Gilio Whitaker, who I know Shuuluk knows, and maybe other people listen to your podcast know. She's an amazing academic and activist and surfer. And I was talking to her for a long time about this film, like right from the beginning. And she sent me some articles and some books, and she was like, I've figured out this thing called like self-indigeneity. I think it's in her new book. There's maybe an article about it. And it basically talks about like white people landing in places and being like, okay, we're here now. And if we've been here for like a certain amount of time, we are now like the indigenous people of this place. And it is like now ours, and like nobody else can come in and do what they want. It's like ours now. And that's like how the world works. And that's really internalized in our culture. Our culture is so imperialistic and colonial that it's like the reason that the US even exists the way that it does. So when the military goes places in the 40s, or if someone's going to Malibu today, like there's this idea that like, if I'm here, I own this and I can do what I want. And it's so destructive and such, it's an attitude that really like delegitimizes not only indigenous people, but like everyone else around you. It's so anti-community, when I think the surfing community actually is really strong and could be even stronger if there was more acknowledgement of our history.
It's interesting. Like I just did an episode with Walter Brenes, who's a lawyer fighting to protect pavonas in Costa Rica right now. And we talk a lot about how a lot of people from the US and Europe, a lot of white people are coming in and gentrifying their area, making it unlivable. People can't live there. They can't afford it. They can't do it. And then they're also tearing up, local businesses and people who are indigenous to there, who have property. And it's kind of sad. Like, I feel like I've talked a lot about surfing and colonialism, and, especially over the last year, I've had a lot of people on, and it's so sad to see that unfortunately we've left not a great wake, with a lot of places, and surfing particularly has had some negative effects as well as positive, but it's definitely, tough to sometimes have a critical eye on it, I guess, to be sober about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's this idea of exploring and finding, but these things, they don't need to be found. They already belong to someone or to somewhere. And just because I didn't know about it doesn't mean I found it. It's such a crazy idea.
It is. It's funny. Like, I think Endless Summer set that template, of this attitude of surf exploration and kind of, and there were, there were lots of exploits of surfers traveling, and some of them did it right, as they did it. They tried to try to be low key, try to respect the culture, respect people. Unfortunately, the masses that follow after, it just keeps, eroding that, unfortunately. But yeah, we I don't know because I don't know about you, Shuuluk, but Zach, you didn't grow up surfing. I grew up surfing, and it's like you get this whole narrative, this whole story that's kind of ingrained in your head. You read all the magazines, and for the most part, they weren't critical. They were, I don't want to say exploitative, but they definitely, you know, made it sexy to travel and have this adventure and feel swashbuckling and all this sort of stuff. And you're like, oh, and we get to know the natives and hang out with the local and native, it's just very condescending attitude that surfing has had. And I'm curious that now with this film program that you've put together, how did this come about, and what is your hope and messaging for this festival and hoping to get across? Because it feels like this is kind of heading in that direction. I was just bringing up.
Yeah, so I think typically surf film festivals focus on celebrity or performance or beauty. And I think there's nothing wrong with like having films about those things. I think surfing incorporates a lot of those things. But there's so many other things that surfing incorporates or is about or is a part of. And I think typically those aren't in festivals. And I think that falls on the shoulders of the programmers and the audience that they believe they have. And I think that people should be challenged more. And I think that we should give people credit to like allow themselves to be challenged too. So a lot of these films, while they might incorporate those ideas of like power, celebrity, or beauty and performance, they also incorporate a lot of other things, like underrepresented voices, or there's a film about wiping out. I mean, we all wipe out. No one wants to talk about it, but like,
that's true.
It happens.
We just want to watch it on a segment in a movie. That's it.
Right. And I think actually there's so much to learn from wiping out and from like quote unquote failing. It's like, if you didn't do the thing you set out to do, does that mean you failed, or does that mean you learned something? And I think surfing can teach us so much, and we really have to be open to all of that. And yeah, I think the program is critical of surfing overall. I think it also is a celebration of surfing. And I think hopefully the same way my film like asks questions, I hope that people come away from the program itself and from the screening itself having more questions about surfing than answers, and maybe having their mind opened a little bit if they have never seen films like this. I also want to say that the film incorporates a few animations from Arnie Jinan Wong, who is an amazing surfer and animator from the 60s, who grew up in Chinatown, San Francisco, was surfing on Ocean Beach in the 60s with no wetsuit, and taught himself how to animate and animated all the sequences for the first surf films in the 60s. So I'm forgetting the titles off the top of my head, but if there's an animation in the 60s surf film, he did it. So those are in the program. And there's also, just as a little tidbit, Laird Hamilton had seen his animations in these films. And in the animations, there's like a tiny little person on a huge, gigantic, like unbelievable wave. And Laird was like, oh, well, that seems impossible, but I want to do that. And now like Laird Hamilton is like the big wave guy. So I think it also just sort of speaks to the power of animation. I'm an animator, but also just filmmaking in general. I think things can be so influential in ways that you never would have expected. I don't think Arnie sat down and made this unbelievable animation being like, I want to, influence some kid to like do this. It's like, yeah. So yeah, I'm just hoping that the program is influential and inspirational in some way, and filmmakers will be there for the Q&A. So hopefully, if we want to talk, if anyone in the audience wants to talk to anybody who is in the film or made the films, they have that opportunity as well. And if I could plug the other two dates, there's two more dates. Yeah. So besides July 25th, there's August 2nd at Digital Gym in San Diego, and then August 30th at the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles. So
you bring it to New York, man.
I would love
bring it to New York.
Invite me.
You're invited. We just have to find a theater because they ain't cheap around here.
Yeah.
But I mean, because that's like right up our community's alley. This would be really appropriate.
Yeah.
I feel like what is it? I mean, I don't know. Like surfing is so good at being the sugar for medicine. I feel like, it can be such a great vehicle to get a point across, or to use it to invite someone to engage in a much broader, larger issue. Yeah, I don't know. I was hoping you can speak to that. Like, I don't know if that's part of that inspiration in doing this film. Like, look, actually, Zach, why are you doing this festival? What sparked it? What got you motivated? Because I think we talked, like I used to do the New York Surf Film Festival, and my motivations were to bring a community together, of course, and get people stoked and just see movies in a proper theater. But I'm curious, like, where did this start, and how did you kind of, come to organizing it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a combination of all my research and all my feelings about surf culture. I think it really kind of portrays itself as a certain thing. And I think there's a lot of capitalism kind of ingrained in it, and a lot of like big surfing wants surfing to like be a certain thing.
Big surf.
To sell boards or board shorts or vacations or whatever. And surfing's a practice. It's like not just a sport. I think the idea of it being a sport is quite new. And really it's a practice, and it is a practice of what you make it to be. And I think many different people use it in many different ways. So I think for the surfer who goes out to Topanga and yells at people, like if they watch this program, they might be like, oh, like, surfing can be this too, or it can be that too. I hope that those people come and, we have a good conversation. It's really just about kind of like highlighting characters and stories that I think are not often told in surfing. Yeah.
Looks like a pretty heavy like a big list of great shorts. We have Gender Outlaw in it, which is a great movie that I've enjoyed, and I've had Tyler on. So I mean, you've got some great stuff in here. I'm really bummed I can't go, but I'm appreciative I got to see this. Where can our listeners go and buy tickets, get everything ready? This is your chance to plug and get the word out.
Yeah. So right now you can buy tickets for the July 25th screening at the Sunshine Brooks Oceanside Theater on their website. The tickets for Digital Gym and Philosophical Research Society are not online yet, but if you follow my film's Instagram, The Inevitable Return, just search that, it should come up. Or my name, Zachary Zezima, or Shuluk's name will all come up, and we're all connected to the film. So if you follow us, there'll be some info on when tickets are available, and the full info on the screenings. Yeah.
And Shuluk, what's next for you? What are your plans now? What do you got going on? And anything you'd like to share?
Getting out to the water. I've been in Arizona now for since last August. So
have you been to the wave pool there yet?
No, I haven't. That thing is pricey. I gotta get my money up, not my funny up before. But I'm out here in law school, so I'm.
Oh man, how are you enjoying it?
Going through the shredder, but I'll trying to make it out unscathed as possible.
What's your hope to do with that, if you don't mind me asking?
Federal Indian policy. So I want to go back to California and work with local communities, and then eventually my own.
Love it. That's awesome. Well, guys, I really appreciate you coming on and spending the time. And listeners, if you can, go follow the film, The Inevitable Return, Zachary Zezima. It's beautiful. It's really well done. It's super entertaining, visually really nice as well. Surfing's not too bad either, Shuluk. From one goofy foot to another, looked pretty good. His style's looking nice. saw some of those chop hops you were trying for, so on the rights, but all really good. And thank you guys so much. And listeners, go check it out. And of course, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and follow at Swell Season Surf Radio. Guys, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.